host, Jim Riley. I hope you enjoy these interviews. That is to everyone. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Answers Yes podcast. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing our show. Our numbers are growing. The audience is getting better. The questions are getting better. And the guests are certainly getting better. And I'm going to dig right into that. I've got Matt Vincent here today. Matt, thanks for being here.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I love to get to chat to people for a moment before the show because you start seeing all the things that you align on. And as I was suggesting before we hit record, I love your messaging through your Instagram posts. I mean, I just popped up before we got on and you're talking about not being a victim to that cell phone, you know, and you just look around the room and everybody's on their phones, right? Like it's such a great message.
Yeah. The cell phone's a really tricky one, man. I think it's really easy to kind of villainize that thing.
Yeah.
As this out of control thing that we don't know how to maintain a decent relationship with. And it's not the phone itself, right? But it's the apps we use. It's whatever is distracting us and taking our time. And I started trying to look at it a different way because as now someone who's a digital creator and spends more time involved with that magic device than I should, or I don't know that should's the right word, probably than we were designed to look at a thing like that. I think that this is such a new technology for our species that it's pretty complicated. And so being able to reframe my perspective on the phone and kind of social media and everything changed a lot. And it was simply that I treat that device as fire.
Yeah.
As simply as fire. And so whether you're a hero or you're a coward or whatever in between, no one's immune to fire. It's always going to be the same thing that we all have to deal with. And so it's up to us to maintain the perspective of how we use it. The coward lets that thing get out of control and it goes into scarcity and it becomes must be nice. And then it gets out and it gets away on them and anxiety builds and everything else. And it can burn their life to the ground. And you see people delete their social media for a week and then they need that fix again and pop back in. And what it continues to show them, right, are the things that they're not into, the things that they're not in love with, and things that make them feel this certain way about themselves. And you want to blame it. When the truth is, it's a reflection. All it does is show you the things you're spending more time and giving more energy to. It doesn't have an opinion.
Right.
Whereas the hero, with the same fire, figures out how to forge tools and cook all of his meals and build a life and create a universe based on that same flame. The flame's not any different. It's our reaction to it. And that's what we've got to be in control of instead of pretending that this outside influence really gets a vote. We choose what gets a vote.
I love that. You're right. We talk about it being a supercomputer. We get to choose how we use that though. Right. Really good point. Hey, look, before we dig into a lot of your messaging on your social media posts, and again, I really love what you've got to say. Can you give us some background on you, who you are, where, I know you're an athlete and you've been involved in sports, but how did that transpire in your life early on to get to where you're at today? And spend as much time as you want on that, because I think people really need to understand where you've come from to get to where you're at.
Yeah. The journey.
Yeah.
So I guess, as we would say, your hero's journey, whatever that looks like. And, for me, grew up fortunate enough to have two wonderful parents that loved me. We weren't rich. My dad worked as a Boilermaker and then eventually a turnaround supervisor in the refineries in Southern Louisiana. And my mom's a teacher and still a teacher. My brother and I both got into sports at a younger age and were kind of not pushed that way, but definitely provided the opportunity to pursue, with the opportunity to go to camps and all those type of things in the summer. And so sports really played a pretty big impact on my life through, the end of high school and into college. Found success in football in high school and then eventually track and field in high school and went on to LSU on a scholarship for shot put, discus, and hammer. Graduated college with a degree in general studies, which I think from LSU means I just gave them enough money that they're like, best of luck.
Here's your certificate.
Yeah, best of luck, sir. You're not going to be a doctor. And so once that kind of ended, my athletic career felt done.
Yeah.
That chapter was over. I wasn't going to the Olympics. I didn't have what that took.
Right.
few years later, I'd gotten into entrepreneurship as my first thing, opened a bicycle shop as I was into cycling, and that went poorly. It failed in a couple, 3 or 4 years, and I'd left with some debt and learning some important lessons, and really thought entrepreneurship clearly not for me.
Yeah. So why a bike shop? I don't see that in your background anywhere. You just, hey, I got
Um,
to open a bike shop.
so my first job in college, when I'd left Sulphur, the town I grew up in, and moved to Baton Rouge, was working at a bike shop as
Okay.
a bike mechanic. Got a job and was willing to learn it, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the culture. I enjoyed the tinkering. I liked working with my hands, um, and it stuck with me. And so even now, continued, I still really enjoy cycling. It had a different, I'd lost a little bit of an appetite for it after failing in the business world there with it, but it wasn't the bike's fault, right? It was
Yeah.
22-year-old me trying to run a business's fault.
Sure.
Uh, and so I opened a bike shop with two partners who were also as interested in it, and it just didn't work out for whatever the reasons are. And I think a lot of that due to just me not having any idea what I'm doing and without guidance.
Yeah.
So that was the route I took. I left that and went for a more normal career, and ended up finding myself in outside sales in the oil and gas industry, and did that for about 10 years up until 2017. I built this career within that space that I was making good money. I was, making almost 200 grand a year. Built a house, was living in Louisiana. And at that time, starting in about 2008, I had started getting back into training and trying to take care of myself a little bit, having a hobby, right?
Right. Sure.
I got into powerlifting, got into strength sports, strongman, weightlifting, and then eventually found the Highland Games. And since I had come from the track and field background, Highland Games is all throwing.
Okay.
And so since I had already had such understanding of how that works based on the Division One career throwing, it was a great transition for me. I spent 8 years competing in that sport from 2008 to 2016, and won 2 world championships, um, and loved it. And then
So
quickly, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
so Matt, you're working a full-time job. You've built a house, for yourself and a living, and now you're also simultaneously competing at that level where you can win that type of championship. I mean, how were you juggling all that?
I started eliminating anything that was an inconvenience to keep me
Mm,
from doing it. Right. So
yeah,
the outside sales job, there's a lot of travel involved, but I'm making my schedule.
sure.
And so my sales territory was also kind of gigantic, as in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would set things up that, like, if there was a competition I was trying to catch in California, I would schedule meetings on Thursday and Friday in California, and have work help pay for the trip, get out there, and then I'd fit the bill for the weekend and get a chance to compete.
Sure. Why not?
Um, and then training for it, I ended up building a garage gym. The really unique part of Highland Games is that there's not a ton of people that do it. And there was really only 20 or so of us who in the world were good
Mm-hmm.
and really taking it very serious. And so I trained in a garage by myself based on everything I learned from strongman and powerlifting and throwing as a collegiate athlete to get myself better at it. I spent time in a field throwing by myself 4 days a week, and I drove to most of my meetings unless they were obscene.
Yeah.
Um, if I had time that I was going to be in Ohio, I would drive to Ohio, and that way I had all my implements in the back of a truck. And if I could find a grassy field, I can train. So
It's
I
interesting.
threw outside of a bunch of hotels by myself.
I'm listening to you, and I'm just thinking about the discipline that it takes to do that, to your craft, right? By the way, would you explain for those that don't know what the Highland Games are, maybe some of the
Sure.
activities within that?
Sure. So the one everyone's familiar with is the caber. So that's, you see guys in the kilts with carrying a telephone pole. That's the
Yeah.
caber. That's one of the events. Now we have 8 other events, and we have 2 stones that we throw just like a shot put. We have, a heavy and a light. We have 2 weights we throw for distance, a heavy and a light. And we have uh, um, 2 hammers we throw for distance, a heavy and a light. And then we have some height events. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a 56-pound weight that we throw for height over a bar. And then we have a sheaf. And the sheaf's the kind of really oddball one, as it is a 20-pound burlap bag that you throw for height over a bar using a pitchfork.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
I'm
I wasn't aware
sure
of that.
the history of all this, right, dates back to in Scotland whenever the English took over and removed all the weapons the Scottish had. They figured out still doing some of these competitions with farm equipment allowed them to compete
Hmm.
and stay sharp.
Right.
And so that's kind of the history behind it.
Awesome.
Um, so getting a chance to do that, fell into that sport and loved it. And
Right.
so I love the part of what you're saying, right? That like discipline it took.
Yeah.
I was obsessed. There's a difference.
Okay. Just beyond the discipline.
Yeah. Discipline is when I show up to do a thing I'm not that interested to do all the time
Sure.
because I know the greater benefit of doing it long term.
Right.
Whether that's maintaining diet or any of the other things. Whereas the obsession with that sport, all I wanted to do was get done with sales meetings so that I could do that.
Right.
So that I could go train. And not to mention when I was training and traveling, I got a chance to actually go throw with my other competitors.
Mm-hmm.
That iron sharpens iron, man. You get around the people that are doing things better than you so that their gravity brings you to them. You learn from them. And so that discipline for that and being able to train, I don't think I really recognized it as the discipline until much later on.
Yeah. Well, what I appreciate about your story, and I'm a Andy Frisella fan with his 75 hard program. I'm my sixth round right now.
Right on.
And people are like, well, I just don't have time for that. And how do you do that with your travel? And I said, well, you know what? I drive my car from here. I'm in Montana. If I've got to go to California, I map out my trip. So if I got to get my outdoor workout in, I'm going to stop in no man's land and go run down the highway or whatever that looks like. Right. But you develop the ability to do it. I'll say discipline, and you schedule it and you make these things happen. There's no excuse for it. So I'm hearing your story going, hey, you care about competing and being successful. So you're willing to drive and carry your assets with you so you can train appropriately. There's
Right.
there's no excuse in your mind not to do it.
Well, I know the other guys that I'm competing with don't have that excuse, right? And if I
Right.
want to see the best I can be, then I'm the one who's got to figure that out. But that's why I built a garage gym because I knew me well enough
Mm-hmm.
that me driving somewhere to go train in a place, I won't go.
Right.
I won't do it. Being able to, with the sales job and as weird as that schedule gets, I like being able to be like, oh, I got 2 hours. Boom, I'm in the garage 30 seconds later and I can get started. So I had to eliminate that barrier because I know how inherently lazy I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. So I'm just constantly trying to outsmart that guy. And so what you're saying of like that continuing to make it worth it, it's because it mattered to me. Right? Like that's what the driving force was is I knew that I had a thing here and a chance to be great at something. And I didn't want to leave anything on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what that took from the years it took me to be good as a thrower in college, that it's a repetition game. There isn't any way to macro dose training to have a really useful effect. In the
Right.
same way that I can't macro dose dieting for 2 days to fix my month. I have to microdose all these small things to really make change. And so that's what allowed me to create that constant adaptation and continue to get better at it.
Matt, what's different about you? We all know ourselves. I think deep inside, we know ourselves. We know our weaknesses. What's different about you that you were willing and you took the action to overcome your weakness, right? You said, I know myself. I knew I needed this garage gym, right? Whereas most people, they know themselves, but they don't take that step. What in your mind um, drives you to be different? I know that's not an easy question either.
Right. It's a great question. I haven't been asked that. I never wanted to fit in, man. Like I never wanted to blend into the bell curve. I didn't want to just have a standard life. I didn't want to have a normal path. I'd already up to this point in my late 20s, right? Like I had tried entrepreneurship, which is a standout, try to do a different thing.
Sure.
You know, I went into track and field and had college paid for it. I was already doing a thing that other people weren't. You know, from that point on, I had found a bunch of weird jobs. I tour managed for a buddy's band. I had bounced and DJed at a strip club. Um, did a lot of weird stuff. I wanted more interesting. And so as that kind of continued, Highland Games gave me this really unique outlet to do a thing, which
Mm-hmm.
provided me travel. I mean, I'm competing like 20 times a year, which is
Wow, that's a
a lot.
lot.
You know, that's a lot of weekends in a row. Um, but I loved it. Like I loved the life pace of during the week, I would fly somewhere for work meetings and then I would fly home and then maybe get on another plane on Friday to fly somewhere to compete, come home Sunday, and then back on another plane Tuesday to go to work meetings. That life to me seemed so great and out of routine that I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do routine really well to some extent, right? Like I have non-negotiables that I need to do every day, but there's a routine that happens over time that I think we start shutting off.
Right.
And then because we're in routine so much and there isn't a new experience and there isn't a new thing pushing us, that why would your brain need to stay awake? It knows all the answers. It already knows what this looks like. It knows what it smells like. There isn't a new problem to solve. And so it just turns off and it'll
Mm.
fill in the gaps.
Right.
But when I'm in new experiences and when I am slightly uncomfortable, it's really awake. And I wanted my life to feel that way. I wanted as much of that to continue as I could.
Can you share some of your non-negotiables?
Sure. Um, they've changed over the years, right? Like
Yeah.
coming into 40 is a lot different than when I was 20. My
Try the
20,
50s. All right.
yeah, I can't wait. Yeah, every decade's been better, and I plan to continue that path.
Yeah, I'd agree
Um,
with that.
non-negotiables right now are my morning routine,
Mm-hmm.
and the non-negotiable side of my morning routine is that I know I need to take time every day before I start answering the world and dealing with outside stress to manage my own shit. That taking a minute to put my own oxygen mask on before I try to help anyone else helps me a lot. It keeps
Mm-hmm.
me grounded. That gives me a moment to do some gratitude journaling. It gives me a minute to do these other things. And so, perfect day, my morning routine can take like 3 hours. I love it. It ends up being training. I spend an hour doing cardio. And during that cardio, I'm not disconnected and staring at my phone.
Mm-hmm.
I will put something on. And again, I still now train by myself. I realize that's one of those that's non-negotiable, that I have to have a place to train that's for me.
Yeah.
And I put on either audiobooks or podcasts now, or a documentary of something I don't know that I'm interested in. I want to wake my brain up to starting to think about things differently first thing in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and then add that in with movement of, you know, spending an hour at 140 beats a minute is huge. I also know that that's the biggest needle mover for my health, is that zone 2 cardio time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that time that we spend in that zone 2 cardio is the biggest needle movers we have for all of our health concerns. That time doing that for, like, what is it? I think 90 minutes a week of zone 2 cardio takes away like 50% of all life causes of mortality.
Wow.
Man, I'll make that choice every day. 90
Yeah.
minutes. Awesome.
Good investment.
Right on. And so from there, after I wrap that up and I'm typically bored, I move into the sauna and then I journal and I write on my phone in the sauna.
Mm-hmm.
Open up the notes section, and typically something, it's been from the audiobook I was listening to or the documentary I was watching. There's some light bulb that's clicked and I just want to process. If I don't have something to write about, I'll just dive into gratitude. What am I thankful for today? What opportunities am I thankful for that I get to pursue? And when I wrap that up in the sauna, I do the cold plunge and spend 3 minutes in there doing breath work. And then I start my day. And while that's 3 hours and ridiculous, as I've built it up to have that ability to do in my life, sometimes that starts at 3 a.m. and sometimes it starts later. And part of that, like, I don't use an alarm clock really anymore unless I have an early flight.
Sure.
I just sometimes wake up at 3. And because I've built a life that allows me to live by my rules, so what? I'll start at 3. I don't need to wait till 5. I don't need the rest of the world to wake up. I can just get going. I can always go to bed early.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's go back to that gratitude real quick. I was doing some work with David Meltzer for a couple of years. This has been almost 5 years ago now. And that was one of his number one messages to anybody was the gratitude, starting your day off with gratitude. What inspired you to do that? I know for me, it was Dave and his methods, and there's a little bit of meditation with that, but what inspired you to do that? And why do you do it? And I know you know this and I do too, but I want my listeners to hear why you do it because it's so important.
yep. Um, about that time, I had a big shift in life about 2014 to 2017. In 2014, my father passed away from pancreatic cancer after like a really quick 11-month fight, and went from normal was my dad to dead in a pretty short time.
Mm,
That that interrupted a lot of stuff for
sure.
me, and it really put a pretty good focus on mortality, which I'm sure we'll cover further into this. Um, so from that point on, the end of 2016, I was injured from competing and went to start trying to fix a knee that was in rough shape, and it didn't go as planned. I finished my last competition in 2016, second in the world, and by 2017 in April, I can't really walk up and down stairs anymore, and I'm in a lot of pain. I had a knee surgery that didn't go great, followed by 7 more that weren't really optimal, and then finally 3 years later wrapped up a total knee replacement
Mm,
at 36. And so that door of what I had become best in the world at was gone. And I was really struggling to figure out that identity and who I was. And while I always had the hindsight of knowing that the Highland Games would end, I never expected to not be athletic.
right.
And I didn't expect for my machine to not operate. And I didn't realize how much I had counted on my machine to just that I had completely taken for granted that it has done anything I've ever asked it to do since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what built all my confidence. That's what built this identity. That's what built that drive. That's what built the show up. And I didn't have any of those tools anymore. And I got really scared, and I got really dark and really lost. And while I had this life and a good career and a job that was paying well, it wasn't it. I was still me.
Mm-hmm.
I was still lost. And all I could see in front of me was this average life of doing the same things every year, of going to the same places and being around the same people and drinking my weekends away and going to the same place for vacation every year. I could just see that thing that I'm so scared of waking up at 60 and going, what happened? And I had to make a shift. So I started looking at different stuff, started diving a little bit more into self help and diving more into awareness work. And I got really lucky to find an early mentor in Aubrey Marcus, if
Mm-hmm.
you're familiar with
Oh yeah.
her. Got really fortunate to know a guy who was Aubrey's number two, Kyle Kingsbury. And then I got invited in. And so being around that and seeing those guys operate in a way that I would never been exposed to, of gratitude and abundance, and then seeing them deal with normal stuff that really would have caused huge rifts in relationships, that they weren't. They were leaning in toward of why that makes me feel this way and how that doesn't have to do with the other person.
Mm-hmm.
That all of this is on me, which leads me to finding the four agreements. This leads me to finding these other books and avenues, because if that's real for them, I'm interested. Because if
Sure.
they can feel that way, that's real, then I see it. And so from that point on, feeling that gratitude and feeling that ability to actually thank, oh man, right? That like this thing's gonna give up at some point. And I can't believe I was so lucky to find a thing I love that much that I got to pursue that hard. It was always going to come to an end, but no one ever gets to even do that.
Right.
And so having gratitude for it instead of bitterness that it ended, the world and universe weren't conspiring against me. Things change, and we're in transition. And being able to embrace that next chapter going forward, I had to alter my way of looking at everything. Otherwise, I'm trapped. And personally, me at that point, like I know I'm hurt, I'm in chronic pain, and I'm trapped, and I'm traveling with a cane. And yeah, I had the discussion with myself of while feeling depressed, and all of it is I know that I won't ride this out. I wasn't suicidal by any means, but I was really honest with myself of knowing that like I won't do this forever. I'll punch out. I know I will. At some point this is going to win and I'll fucking lose.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the reality that I know I'm dealing with, if I don't solve this problem, I better figure out how to solve this problem. And anything is an available path to try then, because I know the alternative is dying.
Right.
And the truth is, that's the end of the path for all of us anyway. Like I know that that's where this whole thing ends anyway, is me dead at some point. And I'm the one who's got to figure it out. And so I leaned in and started opening my eyes to a bunch of stuff that I wanted to write off as bullshit for so long, that I wanted to, not believe that abundance was something that I could change within me. And it wasn't the external abundance I was chasing for validation to answer those questions that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding that and finding that gratitude for that time I had, finding gratitude for my injury has been something I've had now, because I shifted my perspective and realized what new doors that opened for me, because I don't have to travel and compete anymore. I'm not obligated to spend that time doing that thing. So where do we want to put that energy?
Wow.
Instead of it staying focused and down, I get to shift it to where I want it to go. And nothing has been proven to me other that it's not true, that the more I put my energy toward a place, it continues to grow, whatever that is. And so having gratitude for any of that, having gratitude for just the people around me, the opportunities I've had, the books I can read, the air in my lungs, my body's ability to keep moving, my body's ability to keep changing, my body's ability to still answer back. Thank you for whoever that guy was that went through 8 knee surgeries and continued to do rehab instead of just say, fuck it. Having gratitude for all that darkness. That's a shift in perspective.
Sure.
And that's really all that is my perspective on that situation. And the more that I understand that if I am in control of my perspective, I'm in control of my reality. And I want to be in control. I want to control all the things in my life that I can be in control of, because there's an infinite number that I'm not. And I don't want to give them any part of my time or energy. I don't want to give any of my energy to some guy in traffic who slowed me down. I don't want to give any of my energy to my injury, to this woe is me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The universe is completely indifferent to my pursuit in this life. It doesn't want to see me win, nor does it want to see me fail. That's on me. It's on me to continue to find that. And the gratitude keeps me in a place of abundance. And so checking that box first thing in the morning always shifts my day.
It's what a beautiful way you've described that in a portion of your life. And I appreciate how humble you are in telling the story. I'm really good about extracting different parts and adding more questions to the conversation here. I've got about 50, so I'm trying to figure out where do I start. Because this is such an important message for people. My world that I grew up in extreme sports, I was an off-road racer. I raced for Ford Motor Company, Baja 1000.
Oh man. All right.
I started the trophy truck class, the spec trophy truck class, which was basically kind of the NASCAR of off-road racing. And I raced with people like BJ. We were both with General Tire and Monster at different times.
Lunatic that guy is.
Total lunatic, a different breed of animal, right?
I just want to be around lunatics.
But what I've seen now in my 50s, and I stepped away because I've got little kids, is that we crave that adrenaline rush that we received as athletes, right? That you received as a champion Highlander. And when you come to the other side of that, we often go through that depression or that identity crisis. And I love how you describe that you've chosen the gratitude that you got to spend some time in that arena. And now you're going to channel that energy to something else. right? What are some of those things that you're doing now? We skipped a whole portion probably of your life, but I want to follow this course. What
No
are some of the
worries.
things you're doing now that you're rechanneling that energy? Because I hope that my fellow athletes in my world hear this message. I struggle with it all the time, by the way. You know,
Yeah, it's a lot.
it
Look,
is.
I still run into it, right? It's not like this is perfect, but gratitude and abundance are a practice, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a thing you have and then it doesn't go away. It's a practice. In the same way sports are or anything else. It's not like I flip that switch and I have it forever. And so working that practice to get better at it and be able to see the abundance in smaller things or any of that was great. And so I repositioned my energy after, 2017, I got let go from my outside sales job and I'd started my brand at that point, Hate Brand Goods, which is not dead yet now. Um, I started that in 2014 because I was writing and sharing a blog about the Highland Games, and then I'd wrote a couple books on the Highland Games and my own mentality that I had used of like how I get stuff done
Mm-hmm.
was the hate, was this feeling that I had when I look in the mirror every morning that like we got more to give, like it's not good enough. Like if we're still able to push forward, we're gonna push. And so rechanneling that energy from the very specific point of sport, well, how do I apply the same rules that made me successful in that to my business? And then how do I apply the same rules for that later on to my relationships?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I apply the same rules to that to building my own awareness? And how do I apply the same rules that made me a world champion at one thing to improve all the other aspects of my life instead of just one?
Yeah.
But that's where the energy has gone. It's gone from doing that and writing and sharing to writing books, which then turned into the apparel brand. And I've had that for the last 9 years. That's what I do for the majority of my living, which turned into a podcast, which I have 300 episodes on because I wanted to hold conversations with other people. I realized how much that some of the people I had starting to get traction with, not traction, but talk to, Aubrey being one, and, Kelly Starrett being another, and then making close friends with Rob. Uh, man, getting to see those people operate opened my eyes to what was really possible.
Right.
And then when I saw it as possible, I couldn't ever pretend again that it wasn't a thing I could do. It's just a matter, am I willing to solve the problem?
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way with Highland Games, right? Like the problem that you have to solve with Highland Games, because it's not like a max effort thing like weightlifting and powerlifting, strongman, or any of those, the weight you lift always goes up. Highland Games, the weights don't change at all.
Mm-hmm.
You have to throw it further, which means I need to get faster, which means I need to improve technique so I have longer time to apply force on the implement, which means I still need max strength, but I need to be able to have horsepower instead of just move something slow at a heavy weight.
Sure.
And so that puzzle of any time I went too far one way, it pulled away from the others. So figuring out that problem and what the puzzle is that I'm trying to solve with my brand, or whether I'm trying to solve that with my own personal growth or any of that, like that's the puzzle I'm interested in. And so getting to put that energy there, and now seeing more people reach out to me and realize that, man, I just see how many people are stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
see how many people are caught in that darkness that I was caught in, that realization that I have been so focused on making this living and following these expectations that had been set in front of me either by my parents or where I grew up or what school taught me or anything. Where those rules got put in place of what was important weren't as important to me. And until I start figuring out, well, then if that's true, what is important to me, that takes the work. That takes the dive in. I got lucky enough to have access due to this former athletic career to all these other high performers and coaches and mentors that I know other people don't.
Right. Sure.
I started thinking back to my dad, and at 62, and a guy who had his career in the oil and gas, in the refinery, worked at the same place for 35 years and was in the town he grew up in. My dad's 8 closest friends are idiots from our hometown, who had lived very similar lives to him.
Mm-hmm.
So who does he talk to with an existential crisis, or does he have them, or does he not deal with those feelings? I don't know,
Right.
but I know I was, and the people I was around didn't have answers. So that's my job to go find the other Sherpas to help me get through this darkness. And as I've realized that, like, I want to be a resource, I want to be reachable, I want to be able to share what I learned and condense it down the most I can to help people as frictionlessly through that transition as we can.
Matt, what I struggle and we share similar values on the other side of this thing. And we look around, you said it, so many people are hurting out there. It's tough when you're on this side and you're exposed to that hurt, and how do you help so many people and not leave anybody behind? What's some of your ways that you're outreaching, and what are you finding? Do you feel like you're making a difference? Are you drowning to try to help more?
It wavers back and forth on the day.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know, that's the reality of it, and I feel that way about my business, and I felt that way about competing. Um, but I know how to ruin it. I can stop,
Yeah,
right? I can just quit,
but you won't.
but I don't. I never have. It's always continued to serve me, and right now, this seems like the best way that I'm able to serve those around me with the gifts and the experience I have. And so I run into trouble when I become concerned about the people not listening
Mm-hmm.
and why I can't get them to listen. But when I lean back into the people that have raised their hand that are wanting to listen, I am refilled. And so I focus on those. That if you have decided to opt in and you want to deal with it and you want to push forward, I'm all in too. But I will never give a shit about your dreams and your future more than you do. That's one of the rules.
Sure.
Nobody can want my life to be a success more than I do. No one can want my business to be better than I do. No one's allowed to love my thing more than I do. And so that's the feeling I want people to have. I want people to find that fire and spark within themselves to realize it's on them and that only you can build your dreams. And as soon as you take that total accountability, all the rules go away. And then it becomes on you to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then helping those people actually have resources to do it. And so we work a ton. I work a ton with trying to build awareness because I believe that's part of the key. That if you don't know what you want, I can't point you in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
That old Seneca, I believe, is the Stoic that has the line of all ports are bad, or the all winds are bad with no port in mind. And that's true. Like, man, if I can tell you I'm working hard and I'm giving energy, but toward what?
Yeah. What's the end result?
Where are you trying to go?
Mm-hmm.
And are you still based on expectations of where you think this will get you and answer a question? Or are you following intention and being able to listen to it as you continue to go? And I want to follow intention. And I want to teach people to do that. The 4 steps that I believe can kind of get us to accomplishing anything are finding inspiration, building awareness, realizing what your intention is, and then finally taking action toward it. Being able to eliminate those things along the way makes a very clear direction of where you want to go. And once we have that, it's easy to figure out, well, what's the next step? What's one step that gets us closer to that?
Yeah. Wild. Hey, you're on the other side. You were an entrepreneur. You left that bike business. You became a corporate employee. Now you're back to being an entrepreneur. You happy you found your way back?
For sure I am, right? And I'm really happy that I made a liar of a former me.
Yeah.
Because, man, I was really happy to tell people entrepreneurship wasn't for me and I'll never do this again. And that guy's been a liar. I'm more than happy to prove former me is a liar as many times as I can. To
Yeah.
the point now that, like, man, I am so done trying to tell you what 5 years from now looks like. The only thing I'm following is the intention of whatever that guy's interested in pursuing. I want the options there for him.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means financial stability, if that means deeper relationships, if that means building a life that has freedom instead of just work, 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 then I've got to be the one who starts shaping that now. That those are the actions I need to start putting in place now so that they're solid in 5 years from now and in 10 years from now. Nothing happens quick. It's all a grind. It's that microdosing, that little bit every single day that creates that adaptation. Are you familiar with Atomic Habits?
Oh yeah, it's right,
Right.
right behind me.
Yep. And so, like, something as simple as that is that realization that if I can just get a 1% change today over
Hmm.
time, where does that 1% every day put us?
Yeah,
And that's the reality of growth. Everyone wants it to be this magic bash over your head moment, and it's never been that. And you're never going to be able to seize that great opportunity that does fall into your lap if you haven't done the work.
that's right.
You know, I don't get to be invited to speak at something as cool as Vertical Union was or any of these other events if I don't have 300 and plus reps of podcast in me. If I haven't done all the awareness work, I don't get that opportunity. So I don't know what opportunities will continue to come, but I'm going to be ready for them.
Sure. What I love about what you're talking about, I think oftentimes people perceive influencers such as yourself, teachers, leaders, ex-athletes, you know, that you just have it made. They don't realize the reps that you put in every day. And I've been fortunate enough to have some exposure to some high level thinkers and now yourself today. People don't realize the reps that we
The
put in.
only time I've ever been called that. So I'll take that soundbite alone and send it out.
You got it. But
Write it on a crayon, on a certificate. I'll put it on the wall behind me.
I'll send it to you signed. But you
Perfect.
know, the work is being put in every day. I think we realize that we're not going to be who we are without it. And everybody wants that shortcut. You know, when I give entrepreneurs lessons, my number one point to them is patience. You have to have the patience to put in the time because over time, you'll find that success. And when they're like, well, how much time? I don't know, 5, 10 years. How bad do you want it?
It's your journey,
That's right.
right? It's your journey. Your thing's different. I learned that trying to lose weight. I mean, look at my biggest when I'm competing. I think I was up to like 318,
Mm,
and now I'm 220 ish. I mean, I graduated high school weighing 270 pounds. And so this is the lightest I've ever been. I don't have any of the strength things that I had at my strongest, right? And so even people hold on to that thing of like, well, I still need to be able to at least bench this and do this and do this. Like, you know, I'm not accountable to keep that former ghost of me happy.
that's right.
Nor does it change the fact that I did that. I
That's
still
right
have
too.
all that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still that guy. It's just not who I am. And so seeing people understand that they can make those shifts and let go a lot of that stuff because you're only dragging it around for you. No one else cares. You think they do. And you think that it'll ruin this idea of who you are, but I haven't found any of that to be true.
We're more concerned about what other people think than actually what they think, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But by the way, just from your photos on Instagram, you look healthy and strong and at a good fit weight. What is your regimen? How did you get down to that weight outside of maybe your injuries forced you to lose a few?
Um, so at that point of being really hurt and kind of in that dark spot, and I took on that like, well, if I know where this goes, if I don't fix this, I'm
Mm-hmm.
open to anything. I dove into a bunch of unconventional stuff. I got into cold plunging and using an ice bath after being exposed to one through a friend of mine, Kelly Starrett. And I built a chest freezer in 2015 that I used as a cold plunge.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've consistently been doing that since 2015. And it's still part of my daily practice. Uh,
You
it
mean
was
you
one of
didn't
those,
just jump on that fad last week like everybody else?
hey, man, I don't care what gets people to it.
As long as they
You
get
know what
there.
I mean? I don't need any type of thing to be able to be like, he originated. Like, I didn't invent this, dude. People have been using cold water for centuries.
Yeah.
So when I did that, though, I found out that through in the cold was one of the only times that I didn't have any pain.
Mm,
And whether that's due to the cold or whether that's due to the fact that there's so much other sensory overload that I couldn't hear my knee yelling at me,
right.
I didn't care. I got a break. However, the break only lasted while I was in the cold. It's not a great place to operate.
Not really.
Can't really live there, right? It's a little tough. Um, but it was one of those first things that, like, okay, there's something here. Okay, so what else is here? Well, if there was a thing that I didn't believe was true, then became true, then maybe I should just let go of what all my expectations are of how this will go and just form my own opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so through that process of doing the cold or anything else, I decided I dove into a ketogenic diet. Um, First and foremost, working with a coach, Jesse Burdick. And I needed to, I felt that if I'm going to do everything I can to make this better, if I know changing my diet eliminates inflammation, which will eliminate some bit of pain, I'm willing because I know the outcome if I do
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I did that and I did see a markable difference. And then when I removed alcohol from my life, I saw a markable difference. And so these were things that I kept trying and just going, okay, we're finding something. We're finding some new modalities. We're trying some new things, which leads me to occlusion therapy and trying other stuff to try to keep muscle and muscle mass in my legs, because if they atrophy too bad, I'm in trouble again.
Right.
Um, that eventually puts me on a path to do a year of living on a carnivore diet. Um, I want to experiment and find out what my own personal experience is with it instead of making up a story based on, like, well, I heard someone tried that and it didn't work. Well, I know people it did. Why don't I find out for me?
I appreciate what you just said, that you went on the carnivore diet for a year. You know, people jump on things for a month or two and feel like they've got it all figured out, whether it's good or bad for them. But that's a commitment, especially on a carnivore diet. It's not easy to consume that many, grams of protein throughout a year without, having a change or without some ability to do that. So congrats on that.
And look, doing that changed a lot more than I thought. And while what I was doing it for was to eliminate some pain and change inflammation,
Mm-hmm.
what I found through that process is I figured out what portions of food look like. I figured out what foods help me feel my best. I figured out when I add this back in, oh man, I don't feel as good. I'm slow. I'm groggy. I'm these other things, you know. So the more I learned about myself, it was impossible for me to ignore those factors as something I could adjust. And if I'm not willing to do it, then how really serious I am about this progress?
Right. Last night I was having a conversation with my wife. So I did 75 hard going into Christmas. Last day was December 6th successfully. I'm adamant about following the program the way it's laid out. I like the discipline. I took 2 weeks off through the holiday and my wife wanted to jump on. So we both jumped back on January 2nd. But the conversation last night was, I've gone almost a half a year, just under a half a year when I complete this, and I know I'm going to do it, of no alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm in the alcohol industry. I've been in that industry for 30 years, from the vice president of Kettle One Vodka, owning my own tequila company. Now that's really what I do, is consult companies how to do it. I thought, how sad is that in my own reality, right? How sad is that, that I've been drinking since I've been of age, and before that, honestly, this is the most amount
Yeah,
of
since about
days.
middle school, like the rest of
Right,
us.
right, of course, right? We got into dad's stash. But I feel amazing,
Hey, man,
you know?
that's our culture in this country.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think that we can all stand
that's the culture
to
in this country.
give up some of those cultural things, whatever that is in your own life, and realize that you have the ability to feel better stepping away from some of those things, whatever that is, you know?
Yeah, yeah, right. Like, familiar with an idea called like a hedonic treadmill?
No, I'm not.
Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay, so the hedonic treadmill is I don't know what I would call it, philosophy, idea, or whatever it is. The idea is that your base level of happiness is pretty set. And so what people end up doing is external things of, I got more, success at work, I built a house, I got a job, continuing to grow. And what ends up coming back around is you have these moments of highs,
Mm-hmm.
but when you're back to being you and back to being comfortable, you're still here in the bigger house, in the nicer car, whatever it is.
Right.
And until you start addressing that base level and what raises it, none of that's going to change. You're just going to chase external things to validate it. And so alcohol being one of those things, right? That like, oh, it's great for social settings and people don't know what to do without it. And I need it to be more of this or that, right? Like, I'm not interested in giving something a vote
Right.
in my life anymore. And I felt like that was one of those that had a vote for a really long time. Um, and while I'll never consider myself sober, I didn't have anything of a drinking problem, but those are extra calories. Those are extra things I was doing. Those were things that sure as shit weren't helping me accomplish where I wanted to go.
Right.
And, you know, kind of taking of like, wow, but it's normal to do these things. According to who? But what other point in my life do I want to be normal? What other part in my life was I looking to be average? I don't want to do the things that everyone else does. I see what that gets. I see what high performers do, and I see with people who are more strict. I want to follow what they're doing.
Right.
I want to see the routes they take. They're the people that push themselves. They're the ones willing to walk toward that fire every day and be able to hold that line of like, oh no, sorry, I'm good. I don't need a drink. That's tough being an outside sales rep for 10 years.
I'll bet.
You know, it's taken a lot of people to dinner. Look, I got into carnivore while still doing that and quit treating every meal I take people out as a party. I can order a steak.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot have a drink and do those things. I'm sorry if it makes the other people around me uncomfortable. And I don't know why it should. I don't know why what I put in my mouth has anything to do with how you feel about your day. I'm not doing it to show you I'm better than you. I can understand how people want to take that as a challenge, but that's such a scarce mindset that you're already dealing with that the block is much bigger than the alcohol thing. You're already in a spot where you believe that's an impossibility that you can't ever overcome. And in the hero's journey, man, the job is to slay dragons. Find those dragons to slay, get smarter, sharpen your sword, and find another dragon.
I love that. Yeah, I talk about values a lot, what your values are. And on this show, I repeat mine often because I'm not hiding who I am, and my values are God first, family, my health, and then giving back. Business is actually sixth on that. Five is more time to do those first four things. And I realize the older I get, by giving into the alcohol or into the indulgence of things that don't align with those values, I'm really taken away from my family, right? I get up later in the morning. I'm not the man I should be. God forbid if I need to utilize my man skills while I'm drunk, right? I'm just not going to be able to be that father, right? And I think when we start aligning our habits with our values, we realize where we should be. And again, that's why so many things that you've said in the short amount of time I've been following what you're saying has resonated with me because you're spot on these things. And I hope that more people get these messages.
I do too. And that's why I've started stuff like Not Dead Yet Life and working with other people
Yeah.
because I want to help them find that. I want to try to, like, I think there's so many incredible groups out there, whether that's Keaton or it's Andy or it's, Sean or anything. I think it's important for you to find one that resonates with you. And for me, I didn't resonate with a lot of that. I'm far more artistic and want to do weird things and try. I'm a life experience person.
Right.
And so my experience are what shaped everything. And so the more life experience I can have that's unique, the more information I have to help go forward. It changes my perspective, which again changes my reality of how I view everything. Within that struggle, right, of trying new things and trying new experiences, yeah, I mean, people don't think water tastes good. Like, I've heard that from people that's like, oh, I
Yeah.
just don't like water.
My mom.
Like, have you ever been really thirsty? Yeah. Have you ever been really thirsty? Because water's awesome.
Yeah.
If you go do a hard thing and if you push that discomfort, it lowers what brings us happiness back to pretty base level. Having it and gets awesome again because I did a 6 or 7 hour stint on the trail. Or, last year I leaned into trying something new. And again, moving back into cycling, and me and a friend took on the Katy Trail across Missouri, which is this 243-mile gravel trail. We did it in a day.
Mm.
We got on bikes and started at midnight, and we finished at 9:30 p.m. I put out a solid effort for 21 hours and 22 minutes. I don't care
Awesome.
what bed you put me on at the end of it. I
Right.
bet it's great.
So is the water.
So is the water. So is all of it. So is the air in my lungs. So is the fact that I can put any fuel into myself instead of like, oh, this steak's not good.
Yeah.
And so I like those big perspective shifting moments, but they don't find me. I'm the one in search of them. I mean, heck, in 9 days, myself and my creative partner, Brant, my videographer, we're headed to Uganda. Um, a buddy of mine runs a great charity. Justin Wren has a charity called Fight for the Forgotten, and they've been putting in freshwater drinking wells in Africa for the last probably 10 years. And they wanted some help producing content for his charity. And so we jumped on board and at the chance to go. And so we're going to Uganda, and then we're going to fly on a small plane to Western Uganda and stay with Batwa Pygmy tribe for a week. And these are people that are doing a 5K every day to go get fresh drinking water.
Right.
With a couple thousand feet of elevation change, that are carrying two 40-pound jugs down this mountain to get fresh drinking water. It's not like when they get there, there's like a pool of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
they're filling it up by the cup, one at a time. I don't have that problem. I've never had that problem. In fact, I don't have any problems. All of my problems are abundance and in chase of something great.
Mm.
And that's at reframe. But if you don't get a chance to reframe that perspective, the hardest thing you're doing is the hardest thing you're doing, right? Like that's why kids cry over spilled milk, because it's the worst thing they've ever dealt with. But as you grow older, you realize things are worse than that.
Yeah. Yeah. They change. Matt, I feel like I'm taking advantage of your time here.
You're not at all. I'm good to go to chat.
I just, I love the dialogue, and I think it's so critically important for people to hear because there is a lot of lost people out there, and we hear it, we see it. One of the things that you mentioned about your group and some of the others you've been in, and I've supported those other groups too. I love what Sean Whalen said recently. He said, "Look, there's a lot of us out here. Pick the one that resonates with you."
That's it.
And join that group. You don't have to join mine. Join the one that resonates with you. And I hope that we've recorded enough here and certainly have enough content on your own social media and website that people can understand who you are and what you stand for. I've got a couple of years on you and a lot of business history, and I can just tell that we're fortunate to have you out there doing what you're doing and realizing that you've got a story to tell that can bring value to people. So I'll thank you for that. And I guess before I try to wrap this up, and I do appreciate you being willing to keep going as long as we wanted to. What are some of the things that people will experience if they seek you out and they're looking for a little support from your network?
The first is that it is actual community.
Yeah.
That's one of those biggest things that changes how people feel as far as happiness or anything else, is this community of people that are as interested in making progress as you are. That eliminates so much of this drag and friction that people have of wanting to convince people of the direction they want to go, and
Yeah.
then they get pulled back. But when you're already surrounded by people doing that, it becomes so much easier to chase. And then you have resources to ask questions to of people who've had that experience and gone that way. So getting people that come into my group who are in that stage of feeling lost and feeling, but I followed the rules. I followed this idea of what the American dream was. I followed this idea of what was supposed to bring me happiness and fulfillment, and be done with be done with being mad at it,
Mm-hmm.
and realize that now's the time to start taking action and putting toward where you really want to go. Helping people find that drive and helping people find that purpose and helping people figure out how to fulfill their lives instead of waiting on something to do it for them. That's what I want. I want to be surrounded by a country full of accountable people who give a shit about their life the same way I do mine. People that are willing to help. People that the first word out of their mouths is, how can I help? Instead of, what am I getting from this?
Right.
Right. And so for me, being able to lead from that perspective, that's what I've got to do. Is I'm the one who wants to go on podcast and share this message and get a chance to speak and make sure I'm sharp for it, because then that's a better chance that maybe I can resonate with that person and go, but I'm there. And I'm like, I was too. I'm not special. And no one is. We all have that ability to figure it out. But I want to know what my best looks like.
Mm.
Not some idea of it. I want to know the reality. And I want to help people find that and find direction and be able to realize the abundance they're already living in. Because when that happens, your relationship's deeper, your ability to look at information changes, your ability to take things in and let go of what isn't important changes. And through all that, wealth starts to grow, your business starts to grow, because you're not distracted by all these other things that you've been convinced for so long are important. And we keep focused on us and putting our energy toward where we really want it to be. Like, I believe in that manifesting whatever future you want it is to be. If you don't
100%.
have a direction, we're never going to manifest it. It isn't just going to poof, show up. There isn't any magic out there. It's simply being able to do the work and knowing that you're worth that work.
You said earlier, this type of discussion, this language that you're using to describe the work that needs to be done and the state of mind. You said earlier that that's not a headspace you thought you were going to be in one day.
Never.
And then it clicked. How do we convince people that this works? And I'm not going to call it stuff, because it's not stuff. This is a way of life. This is a transformation that you make mentally. This works. This will change who you are. It'll change your makeup. I mean, literally, it's almost a cliche, but the more you give, the more this stuff flows back to you without any expectation. If you can give without expectation, like you said, you're here to show up. By the way, for the record, Matt was 30 minutes early to this interview, provided the tools to do the interview, and was ready. I was out feeding the cows, but that readiness and that willingness, it works, and it comes back to us in a positive affirmation. And people don't understand that.
Oh man, I want to see that unlock for people.
Yeah.
And so much of that gets built in, and then there's guilt associated with going forward and shame about not accomplishing enough. And so many of those feelings you think are attached to other stuff and not you, they're only yours.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to carry them anymore. You don't have to continue being this person you've been, but instead, the actions today, when they're aligned with our intention, that's who makes us who we want to be. And we are simply a sum of the things we try to do every day. Like saying, like, oh, I'm not disciplined, I'm not a runner. Well, like, have you run every day? Because that makes you a runner. Not running far, not running fast, not doing things in a certain amount of time, but simply being it is what makes that real.
Right.
Doing the work and taking the steps and choosing that day-to-day effort that really creates the change. But the ability to change is in all of us, but I can't change anyone.
You know what you just said about being a runner, and this applies to whatever your identity is, right? I heard a friend of mine. I raced Spartan competitively for a few years. After I stopped racing cars, I raced Spartan, got really good at it. But it took a while to say, you know what, I'm an athlete. And this guy that I really respect a lot, he is an athlete. He's doing all the long distance races. And he says, when I switched to calling myself an athlete, I became better, because I realized I am an athlete. I think when we can start identifying as things that we think we never associate with, we are that. Like you said, it doesn't matter how far you run or how fast you run. If you're out running every day, you're a runner.
Right. Look, for so long, like I don't consider myself a cyclist yet. I've owned a failed bike shop, which makes me more of a cyclist than most people.
More than me.
Right. I own 5 or 6 bikes, and I've ridden consistently since I was probably 20 years old. I've now done big races and done 100-mile days and put in 1,000-mile month. At what point have I checked enough boxes to say I'm a cyclist, despite that I always feel like that's a step above who I am or what I'm doing? But at the end of the day, like I'm not looking for that identity anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking for this thing to define who I am. I'm Matt Vincent. I'm not former Highland Games world champion. I'm not a brand owner. I'm not a podcast host. I'm not a mentor. I'm Matt Vincent, and I can do anything I fucking want. What I want to do right now is watch other people switch on and realize they can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's close on that, Matt, because I think that is a worthy point. Look, like I said, I could talk to you all day. I like your approach. I really like seeing your history and photos too. You know, you've got this 300 plus, burly guy that can throw stuff across the field. And this is certainly the softer side of that, but probably the most important side of that. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us men, especially. And man, I've been a little bit hard on dads this year because I want to see dads step up and be dads. And I want them to know that I don't care how big or tough you are, especially here in Cowboy USA, Montana, that even if you're a big 300 plus pound, giant, you can still have that soft side and step up to the plate. So thank you for your message. I'll put your website and all those things in the show notes today. And I'm genuinely grateful for your time and your willingness to be here and share your story with us.
The same. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for listening to the message and having it resonate, and want to share any of the light that you've got with listeners or anything. I'm absolutely honored.
We're going to push it as hard as we can, brother.
That's it.
Right on.
Thank you for listening to today's show. It is my pleasure and honor to interview all of the guests that have been on the Answer is Yes podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, please go on iTunes and subscribe, give a rating, or simply tell a friend about the show. We also believe in the message of our guests and the positive influence of their stories. As my own mentor and coach, David Meltzer, has taught me, spend some time every day thinking and writing about the things in your own life that you have more than enough of. You will find out how blessed we really are. Please visit my website, livelifedriven.com, for the latest updates about me and what I'm doing. Plus, I post a monthly blog about the many topics on this show. This podcast can also be found there. As I learned early on in life, what you believe is what you will achieve. Thanks, Mark Victor Hansen, and thank you, and have a great week.